Hey guys, tonight we're peeling back the creaky wooden doors of the medieval justice system. A place where the punishment didn't always fit the crime, but it sure made a lasting impression. Picture it: cobblestone squares, echoing with cries, iron tools that look more like nightmare props, and a crowd of villagers who've shown up not just to watch, but to cheer. You're about to stroll into a world where stealing bread could cost you your ears, and where chickens weren't the only ones getting pilloried. Fair warning, you probably wouldn't survive this, not with your head tongue or dignity intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always amazing seeing how far these sleepy little rabbit holes travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your strange little walk through punishment history as a humble baker's apprentice, trudging down a muddy alley in a town called Chesterfield, fictional, but no less grimy than real medieval villages. The year is 1347. The Black Death is still a whisper on the wind. But tonight's trouble isn't about rats or plague. It's about an old man who stole a chicken. You don't know him personally, but you've seen him hobble past your bakery window muttering about visions of St. Cuthbert. Apparently, he got hungry. The local lord got angry. And so now in the square, a wooden contraption waits the pillory. At first glance, it doesn't look so bad. Just a wooden post with holes for hands and a neck. But once you're in it, things change. Fast. Villagers throw rotten cabbages, mud dung, anything they can spare. Children laugh. Dogs bark. Someone throws a dead rat. There's no timer, no formal sentence length. He'll stay there until the crowd gets bored. Or until his legs collapse. Whichever comes first. That's just the beginning. You see, medieval justice wasn't just about deterrence, it was theater. Designed to humiliate, scare, and entertain all at once. The law was local, uneven, and incredibly creative. If you committed slander in some towns, your punishment might involve standing in the town square with your tongue clamped in iron tongs. The message was clear: loose lips lose more than friends. You once watched a man paraded around town with a paper mitre on his head labeled gossip. His crime: telling people the blacksmith's daughter was sleeping with the abbot. Was it true? No one cared. The point was public correction, not truth. And heaven help you if you were a woman accused of witchcraft or excessive argument. One punishment popular across England was the scold's bridle, an iron cage fitted over a woman's head with a metal tongue plate pressed down inside her mouth to keep her from speaking. Sometimes the bridle was decorated with bells, so everyone knew a loud woman was approaching. It didn't matter if she was guilty of anything real. Being disliked was often enough. You learned early that punishment wasn't just about what you did. It was about who saw you do it, or who accused you first. Accusations could come from neighbors, priests, even your own family. Once you saw a boy dragged into court for disrespecting his father's voice. The record didn't say what that meant, but he came out with bruises and a fine his mother had to pay by selling their goat. And that's the other side of it: fines. Not all punishments were physical. If you were rich or knew someone who was, you could buy your way out of most things. Money meant mercy. No money meant spectacle. It wasn't just small crimes either. Even capital punishment had its flair. You remember the time you were 13 and stood among a crowd of hundreds watching a man be hanged, drawn, and quartered. His crime: treason. You didn't even know what that word meant at the time, but you knew it was serious when the executioners showed up with 3 horses, a brazier, and a saw. The man was dragged behind a cart through the streets first, then hanged, but not until dead. They cut him down, sliced open his belly, pulled out his insides, and burned them before his eyes. Then they beheaded him and chopped his body into 4 parts, which were nailed to posts along the roads as a warning. One arm ended up outside the bakery. You didn't sleep for a week. Even as a child, you understood the performance wasn't just about death, it was about message. The crowd was part of the punishment. You were part of it. And then, of course, came the animal trials. Yes, animal trials. You once attended a full ecclesiastical court, proceeding where a pig was put on trial for killing a child. It had a defense attorney, witnesses. The pig, of course, just grunted. But that didn't matter. It was found guilty, dressed in a waistcoat, and hanged in the village square. The crowd cheered. That day you realized something uncomfortable. The law wasn't about logic. It was about ritual. About making the invisible guilt, shame, disobedience visible. You see, punishments become stranger the more they try to symbolize something. A poacher forced to wear a deer mask while being whipped. A thief branded with an F on the cheek so the world never forgot. A man forced to carry the town's largest cooking pot, chained to his neck for a week, because he broke it during a drunken rant. Punishments were often invented on the spot by local magistrates, chosen to fit the mood of the village more than any legal statute. Sometimes they were poetic. Other times, pure madness. And through all of this, you never once saw anyone actually rehabilitated. They limped away, broken, bitter, or disappeared altogether. That's when you started wondering, was punishment ever about justice at all? Or was it just the loudest way to say, don't be different? The question sticks with you now as you lie on your straw mattress, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Somewhere another punishment is surely being devised, and tomorrow the square will be full again. Because in this world, pain isn't hidden, it's displayed, and the stranger it looks, the more it works. The next morning, the baker sends you to deliver a loaf to the magistrate's house, a crooked building with ivy curling around its stone columns and a door that never quite shuts right. You hate going there, not because of the magistrate himself, who is small and always smells faintly of onions, but because of what hangs over his hearth. It's a mask, iron, human-shaped, mouth open in a scream. You've seen masks like it before, but this one is different. This one belonged to a man who had lied under oath, they said, but no one remembered the lie. They only remembered the mask. The magistrate had it nailed to his wall as a reminder. You set the bread down and get out as fast as you can. As you step into the street, the town crier begins shouting. There's to be another public sentencing this afternoon. A butcher's apprentice caught tampering with the weights on his scales. That's a serious offense, fraud, they call it. Cheating the town. Cheating God. Everyone knows what's coming, the drunkard's cloak. It's a massive wooden barrel hollowed out with holes for the arms and head. The accused is forced inside his body, strapped upright so he can walk, but just barely. He'll be paraded through the village for hours while children throw turnips and old women jeer. If he falls over, the procession stops until he's righted. If he collapses, the magistrate may order a second round the next day. It's hard not to stare when the boy is marched past your bakery. You recognize him. He used to sneak scraps from your window. Now his face is flushed red more from humiliation than effort. People laugh. But you don't. Not anymore. The cloak isn't just punishment. It's branding. Even when he takes it off, everyone will remember it. You begin to notice more and more punishments that feel like theater designed not to stop the crime but to make a lesson of someone. One man, a gravedigger accused of laziness, was forced to dig holes in the village square for 3 days straight, even in the rain. He wasn't paid. He wasn't allowed to rest. When he collapsed, a priest was sent to read him last rites, just in case. He recovered, but he left town the next week. Another woman was convicted of fortune-telling. Harmless, most thought. But the magistrate called it heresy by amusement. She was forced to walk backward around the perimeter of the town 7 times, while reciting psalms barefoot on gravel with a veil over her eyes. She wasn't allowed to speak during the entire ordeal. And then there were the punishments where the crowd itself was invited to participate. You once saw a man lashed for unpaid debts, normal enough. But what made it bizarre was the way it was done. Instead of the constable whipping him, the townsfolk were invited to come forward. For every coin the man owed someone got to strike him once with a rod. Most did. Some laughed while they did it. It wasn't about justice. It was about permission. The weirdest punishments, though, often involved symbolism. A cooper accused of selling sour ale was made to drink it in front of the whole town while wearing a tunic covered in painted hops and spoiled wheat. People said he retched for days. A woman caught bathing in the river on a holy day was forced to stand in a tub of ice water while a bell was rung beside her head every time she tried to speak. No one remembers what she tried to say. Even animals weren't safe. You recall another pig, this one accused of trampling a lord's garden. The town held a mock trial in which a cat played the judge and a donkey stood in the witness box, its ears tied back to mimic a courtroom wig. The pig was found guilty. It wasn't executed. It was made to wear a bell and lead the livestock parade on holy days. Forever. It was funny. Until it wasn't. Because soon after, someone accused your friend Willem, the boy from the tannery, of stealing cloth. You knew he didn't. He was with you all day. But the cloth was missing, and someone had to pay. Willem was sentenced to the flogging post. It wasn't the pain that stayed with you. It was the silence. The way his father didn't speak. The way Willem didn't cry. The way the town seemed to forget he existed afterward. Like punishment wasn't just about pain, it was about removal. That's when you realized how bizarre medieval punishments truly were. Not in their form, but in their function. They weren't meant to correct. They were meant to separate, to draw a line between us and them. The punished became cautionary tales, warnings, symbols. Their bodies were used like signs. Do not cross this line or you will become this. And once marked, you never truly returned. The branding wasn't always physical. Sometimes it was a hat, sometimes a song, sometimes a nickname that stuck like dried blood. One man was caught stealing honey. He was made to wear a bee-covered cloak and stand near the hives for 3 hours. He didn't get stung, but everyone called him Buzz for years. His children, too. And yet for all the absurdity, you begin to see something darker. These punishments were strange because they had to be. In a world where prisons were scarce, judges were local, and written law was barely consistent, spectacle was the system. If people couldn't remember the statute, they'd remember the man who walked in circles wearing antlers because he kissed someone's wife. That was the logic. Don't repeat the mistake? Not because it's illegal, but because you saw what happened to the last guy. And if you forget, the magistrate still has the mask over his hearth to remind you. By now, you start noticing just how many parts of the village exist because of punishment. There's the pillory, of course, centrally placed like a town ornament. The stalks are nearby too, bolted into stone as if part of the foundation. But there's also the ducking pond, an otherwise still little patch of water at the edge of town, now permanently churned by scandal. You know it's not for fishing. It's for testing truth. A few days after Willem's flogging, you hear shouting again in the square. This time it's not for theft or debt. It's for gossip. Two women accused one another of slander. Each claimed the other was lying about a dispute involving chickens and a missing necklace. It doesn't matter who's telling the truth because the punishment is the same. They're marched to the ducking pond. The idea is simple. The women are tied to a wooden seesaw contraption, the cucking stool lowered repeatedly into the water until the magistrate decides they've learned their lesson. Supposedly, if you're guilty, the water rejects you. If innocent, you sink. But in practice, everyone gets soaked. You watch from the edge, the crowd pressed close, laughing and shouting with every splash. Some throw pebbles. One of the women screams curses through chattering teeth. She gets dunked again for insolence. It doesn't matter who started the rumor. They'll both be remembered as the ducked. That's how justice works here. It doesn't clear your name. It brands you with permanent suspicion. The day after, you overhear villagers refer to the two women simply as the Sisters of the Pond. No one says their real names anymore. Meanwhile, you're sent to help at the bakery's mill just for a few hours, turning grain into flour. While there, you meet an old man who once served as a punishment clerk for the manor. He's retired now, half blind, fingers curled with arthritis, but his stories are sharp as ever. He tells you about one of the strangest punishments he ever recorded, the shame saddle. A man was caught cheating on his wife. In some towns that might lead to public confession or a fine. But here he was, paraded around the square on a wooden donkey with a spiked saddle. His hands were tied backward. A bell hung from his hat. On his chest was a sign, "I rode others, now I ride this." He couldn't sit properly for a week afterward. Then the clerk mentions another case, a tailor convicted of overcharging noble customers. His punishment, to sew with thread made of thorns. Every stitch bloodied his fingers. He finished 3 tunics before fainting. What was the point of that, you ask? The clerk shrugs. So he wouldn't forget, he says. And so no one else would want to learn the trade dishonestly. Pain as reminder. Pain as education. It stays with you. Back in town, something else is happening. You hear rumors, soft whispered ones, about a baker's boy, not you, fortunately caught, on giving extra bread to a widow. That might not sound like a crime, but it is. Bread is taxed. The magistrate considers generosity an act of redistribution, something that must be punished. The sentence, public kneeling, all day on stone. The boy is forced to kneel at the bakery's threshold, arms raised in penance, a basket of stale bread hung from each hand. People walk by. Some jeer, a few nod in sympathy, but no one helps. By sunset, his arms are shaking, his knees bloodied, and yet he gets up on his own. You see it his face as he turns away. He's not broken. He's angry. It's the first time you feel a flicker of something dangerous in the air. Not fear, not shame, but resentment. You realize bizarre punishments don't just humiliate. They divide. They create tension, distrust. If someone is punished for helping others, how long before kindness itself becomes suspicious? And what about confession? That's its own strange tradition. In some cases, to be spared death, you can publicly confess your crime and beg forgiveness. This is often done on the ladder. A wooden staircase is dragged into the square. The accused climbs it high above the crowd and delivers a speech. It's theatrical. It's trembling. It's required. One wrong word, and the magistrate may reconsider mercy. One man, a tanner, confessed to stealing a priest's cow. He was meant to be flogged and banished. But halfway through his speech, he made a joke. Said the cow moaned like a choir boy. He was hanged the next morning. Words matter. So does silence. There's another punishment you've only heard of in whispers, the Iron Maiden. A terrible device rumored to live in the dungeons beneath the Baron's keep. A standing coffin filled with spikes. They say no one ever died in it, but from fear of it. It was threat enough. Whether it exists or not, doesn't matter. The belief is enough to scare people straight. That's what all these bizarre punishments do. They build a culture of fear, one where spectacle keeps the peace more than law, where even your dreams feel watched. You begin to imagine what happens when the wrong person is in power, when punishments become personal, arbitrary, inevitable. And you understand the weirder the punishment, the more it sticks, the more it spreads, like fire, like legend, like control. You fall asleep that night listening to distant voices from the square. Someone is cleaning the stocks. Someone else is repainting a sign. Tomorrow will bring another show. And the strangest thing, everyone will be there. Not because they have to, but because they want to. The day after the ducking pond spectacle, you return to the bakery early. The air is thick with mist, the kind that muffles every footstep and makes even the birds reluctant to sing. The baker doesn't say much, he rarely does, but he nods toward a small pile of dough and gestures that you'll be delivering the morning loaves. Again. You've come to enjoy the walks, though, not for the fresh air. It's the overheard conversations, the subtle shifts in tone, the way people talk about punishment as if it's weather. Inevitable, sometimes cruel, sometimes oddly beautiful, but always, always there. As you pass the square, you notice the carpenter setting up something new. Not the stocks, not the pillory. It's a large, heavy iron cage suspended from a wooden beam, the gibbet. And just like that, you feel the collective attention of the town shift. You already know what's coming. Jibbiting was rare but unforgettable, reserved for the worst of crimes, murder, betrayal, counterfeiting. The accused would be hung in the cage either after execution or more cruelly, while still alive, left to die slowly of exposure, thirst, or shame. The body, or what remained of it, would stay there for weeks. Birds pecking, children staring, time stretching. It wasn't just punishment. It was presence. An eternal sentence of visibility. Whispers swirl around town that the blacksmith's apprentice, Johann, is the one marked for it. Rumor says he was caught trying to forge coin molds in secret. You can't imagine it. He's always been quiet. Careful. But maybe that's what made them suspicious in the first place. By dusk, it's confirmed. He's to be gibbeted alive. The charge is treasonous forgery. Not because he printed money, but because he might have. And because the Baron's coins have been questioned recently, so someone has to answer for that. The next day, Johann is marched through town in chains, head bowed, lips cracked. The cage groans as they lower him in the iron creaking, with the slow, deliberate finality of punishment made permanent. You don't go to watch it. Not directly, but the cage is impossible to ignore. They place it at the crossroads on purpose. No one can come or go without passing it. At first people gawk. Some cheer. A few even spit. But as the days pass, the cheers fade. The laughter dulls. Now and then someone throws a crust of bread toward him, though it rarely reaches. Birds gather. The stench begins. And suddenly, no one wants to look anymore. But no one dares ask for the cage to be taken down either. Because that's the final, most bizarre truth of medieval punishments. They aren't just about pain. They're about proximity. They're about making suffering part of the landscape. So you grow up seeing it, smelling it, naming streets after it. There's Hanging Hill, Scald's Alley, the Whipping Wall. Even your bakery stands at the corner of Broken Man's Turn. No one questions why. They just know the stories. The baker once told you about the gauntlet, another punishment designed not to execute, but to wound the memory. A criminal was stripped to the waist and made to run between two lines of villagers, each armed with a stick rod or knotted rope. If he fell, he was beaten more. If he ran too fast, they started again. The goal wasn't death. The goal was retention. Pain is remembered longer than apology, the baker had muttered, kneading dough with thick, scarred hands. And as you walk back past Johann's cage on the fourth day, you start to wonder how long he'll be remembered. Maybe forever. Maybe not at all. Because in the strangest twist of all, some punishments become so common they lose their effect. Become part of the background. You remember another case, an innkeeper who was forced to wear a wooden yoke with clay jugs dangling from either end filled with vinegar and ash. He had watered down the ale. The punishment was public shame. But by day 3 people started laughing with him. By day 5, they were calling him Old Juggles and buying his drinks again. Sometimes punishment creates monsters. Other times it creates mascots. And still it keeps happening. There was a shepherd once who swore too often in the fields. The priest got tired of hearing him curse in the echo of the chapel walls. So the man was made to wear a necklace of carved wooden tongues, each painted red, each tied with string to clack against one another whenever he moved. They called him the Bell-Mouthed. He left town 2 weeks later. Sometimes it's not the device that breaks you, it's the echo it leaves behind. Like the tinker who fell asleep in church. His punishment was to carry a pew on his back every day for a week. After that, everyone called him Sanctum. He never entered another chapel again. So yes, medieval punishments were bizarre. Strange in shape, absurd in execution. But they were also sticky. They were designed to cling to the mind, to turn people into walking cautionary tales, to fill the town square not just with bodies, but with legends. And every time a new scaffold rises, you know the crowd will come, not just to see justice, but to feel the comfort of a punishment stranger than anything they'll ever do. A punishment bizarre enough to believe it must be just. Because how else could it be allowed? And that's the most unsettling part of all. You're sent to the town records office on the edge of Kesterfield one morning, a dusty, narrow building that smells like moldy parchment and boiled ink. The clerk there is an old man with a curved spine and ink-stained fingers, half-deaf, but always muttering to himself. He hands you a bundle of bread receipts to deliver to the tax collector, but not before you notice something on his desk. A list. Old. Faded. Titled simply, Judgments Rendered Spring Assizes. Curiosity gets the better of you. You read it upside down. It's not the crimes that stay with you, it's the punishments. Theft of eggs locked in stocks with bird seed in lap. Lying to priest face smeared with honey tied to a tree. Attempted elopement, both parties yoked together for 3 days. Public indecency parade through the market, wrapped in cabbage leaves. You can't help but think, who came up with this? Who decided cabbage leaves were the answer to scandal? Later that day, the tax collector's assistant tells you more. He's young, bored, and eager to gossip. He says that punishments are sometimes suggested by the townspeople themselves. The magistrate has final say, but he'll often take recommendations. That's how we got the mirror punishment, the boy says, grinning. You ask what that is. He laughs. You ever hear about the cooper's son told everyone he could outdrink the baron's men? Made a spectacle of it. So they made him sit in the square surrounded by mirrors for 3 days. He had to look at himself. Couldn't escape his own drunken face. The logic behind it is absurd, but it works. The cooper's son left town reportedly sober and silent. And that's the deeper current under all these strange theatrical sentences. They're not just meant to hurt. They're meant to reshape behavior, to force self-awareness, to reflect fear back onto the person and onto everyone watching. You start keeping a mental list of these punishments, cataloging them in your thoughts, as you walk the familiar muddy streets, the wooden gossip wheel. A woman made to spin in circles slowly while her accusations were read aloud. Dizzy, humiliated, and too sick to speak for days. The false tongue. For liars, a carved wooden tongue tied around the neck, stained red. Any time they spoke, they were mocked as fork tongue. The shaking board. For those who fell asleep during sermons, strapped standing to a vibrating plank, while others shouted verses. Not painful, just impossible to forget. And then there's the pig's procession. That one you remember vividly. A man had been caught disguising bad meat as pork and selling it to the infirmary. His punishment, to wear a pig's mask and crawl through the market on all fours, squealing every 10 steps. Every time he failed to squeal, someone got to throw pig dung at him. The whole thing took an hour. But the tale still gets told 5 years later, especially when the butcher's in a bad mood. Strangely, it's become part of the town's identity, its folklore. These punishments aren't just lessons. They're stories, passed down like fairy tales, repeated, embellished. And when people recite them, it's not with horror, it's with affection. You start to understand medieval punishment was as much entertainment as it was enforcement. In a world with no plays, no books, for most, no traveling minstrels. Unless it's harvest season, the public spectacle of someone else's shame becomes a kind of civic theater. The square is a stage. The punishment is the performance. The audience laughs, recoils, claps. They remember. And the strangest part, so does the person punished. You hear of a farmer named Edwin. Years ago, he was caught shorting the Lord's grain deliveries. His sentence was called the lean larder. They built a cage just large enough for him to stand and stocked it with food, but only visible food. Loaves hung just beyond reach. cheese wheels beneath his feet, apples dangling from strings above his head. He was fed bread and water, nothing more, for a week. Now Edwin runs the most honest grain trade in town. He tells the story himself at the tavern drunkenly, yes, but with pride. Like it's a badge of honor. Or maybe a ghost he's decided to carry with a grin. You wonder how many others bear their punishments like twisted trophies. How many normalize them? You think of the children, how they play. They don't pretend to be knights. They don't play at crusades or dragons. They play magistrate and criminal. One child ties another to a tree and makes up a rhyme for stealing eggs and little figs. You now must march in donkey wigs. They all laugh, and you realize the absurdity of medieval punishment isn't just in the acts themselves, it's in how deeply they root into the fabric of life. No one questions them. No one asks if they make sense, because they're everywhere. And because somehow the stranger they are, the more normal they feel. You fall asleep that night wondering if there's a punishment for asking too many questions. And if so, whether it too involves a pig mask. It's market day in Kesterfield, which means the square is packed. Vendors shout about root vegetables, iron nails, salted fish, and potions that will either cure your fever or make it worse. Children dart between stalls with crusts in their fists. A juggler performs with 3 apples and a dangerously unwashed face. But today the real entertainment isn't the wares or the stunts. It's the trial by ordeal. You hear the murmurs before you see the accused. A miller's daughter, barely 16, charged with theft and blasphemy. No one seems sure which came first. Did she steal bread and then curse the priest, or curse the priest because he caught her stealing bread? Doesn't matter. The magistrate has called for an ordeal. Ordeals are something else entirely. Not punishment. Not quite. They're judgments by the divine. When the local court can't or won't decide, they throw the case to God. You elbow into the crowd just in time to see her led toward the church steps, hands tied loosely in front of her. She's pale, blank-eyed. You don't know her name, but already you feel the edge of your stomach curling. The priest reads the charge aloud, then calls for water. A wide copper basin is filled from the well, cold, clear, and deep. Ordeal by cold water. If she floats, she's guilty. If she sinks, she's innocent, though that doesn't mean she'll survive. The townsfolk call it justice. You call it a gamble. She's tied loosely enough that she can be pulled out. It's not intended to kill, just to terrify. 2 women recite prayers. A constable drops her in. She sinks fast. The rope jerks. Gasping, soaked, she's dragged back up, coughing and shaking. The priest declares her innocent. The crowd applauds. You walk away. There's no celebration in her eyes. Only the weight of being almost drowned for nothing. That night the tavern is alive with debate. Some say she fooled the water. Others claim she was cursed all along. A few murmur that the priest just didn't want the guilt of a girl's death on his conscience, not again. But what no one questions is the ritual itself. Because it's old. Because it's familiar. Because it feels like something holy. And that's the danger. When punishments grow bizarre enough, they blur into religion. It's not just water. There are other ordeals. Ordeal by fire. A man must carry a red-hot iron bar for several paces. If his hands heal clean in 3 days, he's innocent. Ordeal by cross. 2 men must stand with arms outstretched like Christ. The first to lower his arms loses. Truth decided by endurance. Ordeal by ingestion. The accused eats dry bread and cheese while reciting prayers. If they choke, they are lying. If they swallow cleanly divine grace. You've seen it. You've tasted it. Once years ago, when your master was accused of underpaying the tithe, he sent you in his place. You recited the Lord's Prayer while chewing stale rye. It stuck in your throat halfway through. You faked a sneeze, coughed, lied through your teeth. They believed you. You never ate rye again. Punishments like these linger in the mind not just because of their absurdity, but because they look so sacred. They're clothed in ceremony, dipped in incense, spoken in Latin. But their outcomes are random, arbitrary, and always stacked against the poor. No nobleman is ducked in the pond. No baron's daughter kneels on stone. You realize slowly that these punishments are shaped not by justice, but by performance, by what looks right. You pass the square the next morning and see a new addition, the shame tree. It's not a real tree, just a tall post nailed with boards that stick out like branches. From each branch hangs a sign: I lied to my father. I spat at a priest. I sold short measures of butter. I looked at another man's wife. Each sign is scrawled in paint, each signed below with a name. The accused are made to write their confessions and hang them in public. Some are real, some clearly aren't. One says, I think too much. No one knows who wrote that one. You stare at it for a long time, and then you keep walking, because that's what everyone does. They walk past, they chuckle, they whisper, and tomorrow there will be more signs, more oddities, more rituals designed not to fix society, but to maintain its illusion, to remind everyone that guilt is a matter of visibility. That punishment in the end is about memory, because no one forgets who walked through town with goat horns strapped to their head for envy. No one forgets who was forced to speak only in rhymes for a week because they were too sharp with their tongue. No one forgets the girl who sank even though she lived, and neither do you. Because the most bizarre punishments aren't just ones you witness. They're the ones that change how you see the world. A storm rolls in the next week, darkening the sky with low-hanging clouds and making every surface in town slick with mud. The square empties, the market closes early, and the town crier's voice goes unheard for a few rare days. But the rain doesn't wash anything away. The gibbet still stands at the crossroads, rusted now, and creaking as the wind whips past. Johann's body is gone, finally taken down after 3 full weeks. But in its place, a plaque has been nailed to the post, as so, let none profit falsely, lest they hang and rot. It's not poetic, not even clever, but it works. People pass it in silence, heads down, hoods up, and soon new rumors begin to drift on the damp air. The baker's niece, Elspeth, has been accused of temptation, not theft, not lies, not even adultery, just temptation. You overhear it at the tavern. She smiled at the wrong man, or walked without a veil, or maybe it was the way she danced at the harvest feast, one swirl too lively. No one's sure, but the verdict is already whispered before the charge is official. The brank, also known as the scold's bridle. You've heard about it, read about it, even seen it displayed in the magistrate's house once. A grotesque iron cage designed to wrap around the head, pressing a flat plate or spike into the mouth, to prevent speaking. A punishment meant for loud women, wicked women, women who disrupted. When it's worn, the face becomes both hidden and exaggerated, trapped behind cold metal, with a mouth forced open or pressed silent. It makes the wearer into a caricature, a walking insult, an accusation in human form. Elspeth is fitted with it the next morning. No trial, just ceremony. She's walked through the square barefoot in the mud, tears mixing with rain. The crowd watches, not angry, not even curious, just present. She wears the brank for half a day. That's all it takes. She never speaks above a whisper again. You start to notice how many punishments focus not on violence but on voice. A boy who sang bawdy songs in church is sentenced to sing nothing but psalms for a full week, or face the stocks. A woman accused of reading unapproved literature is forced to recite verses while being pelted with flour. A former scribe caught forging a love letter for a servant girl is made to copy the town's law book by hand 100 times. Silence isn't just enforced through force. It's reshaped. The more you listen, the more you hear how many people have gone quiet, not from peace, but from the weight of memory. You realize there's a kind of second punishment that no one talks about. One that comes after the sentence ends. It's called reputation. A man might finish his time in the stocks, but he'll still be called soft hands if he once pretended to be a carpenter and failed to lift a beam. A woman may pay her fine for false testimony, but everyone still eyes her when she walks by as if the lie is still walking with her. Even children carry labels, little leech pie boy, cuss mouth. You begin to wonder if the bizarre punishments weren't the cage, the stocks, the stool, but the names, the echoes, the way a single mistake becomes who you are. Even dreams aren't safe. You dream of the shame tree one night, except in your dream you're the one hanging the signs. You don't know what they say, only that each one bears your handwriting. You wake up sweating. At the bakery, the old man jokes that you've been quieter lately. You laugh nervously. He nods. Better that way. Talkers get tied. You smile, but it lingers. Then one morning, something different happens. A traveler passes through town soaked in road mud clearly from somewhere far away. He asks for bread. You give him a heel. He thanks you and then softly asks a question, why do they do it? You blink. Do what? He gestures toward the square where a man is sweeping the pillory as if it's sacred ground. All the punishment, all the show. You pause. You want to say, to teach us or to keep order, but instead you say the first thing that comes to mind. Because we've forgotten how to forgive. The traveler says nothing, just looks at you for a long moment, then walks on. You never see him again, but the question follows you all day. That afternoon, the carpenter builds a new scaffold. You ask no one what it's for, because you already know punishments must keep coming. Otherwise, someone might notice the silence where fear used to live, and that would be the strangest thing of all. It begins with a whisper, the kind that spreads faster than fire and burns just as hot. A merchant's son has struck a priest, not killed, not even bruised him badly, just shoved after a drunken dispute about owed tithes and sour wine. The priest cried assault. The magistrate, eager to demonstrate that no hand may be raised against the church, declares the boy must undergo penitential processional correction. You've never heard the term before. but you don't have to wait long to see it in action. At sunrise, the boy is led through town on his knees. A heavy iron cross is strapped to his back, not a small symbol, but a towering thing that drags grooves through the mud. Each time he falters, a clerk rings a bell. The procession takes hours. He passes the market, the pillory, the ducking pond, the gibbet post. And every step says the same thing. This is what happens when you question authority. Later you hear someone call it the crawl to grace. They say it's a revival of an older punishment from a more pious era. You wonder what that means, and how many times punishment is brought back simply because someone misses the feeling of control it gave them. You start seeing that a lot. Old methods reborn under new names. The barrel of repentance now called the cloak of contrition. A hollow barrel painted with flames worn by those accused of speaking against the church. It's absurd and effective. The whipping tree becomes the limb of justice. Same tree, same rope. Just a brass plaque to make it feel dignified. Public shaming now called civic correction. But nothing really changes. The names grow more elaborate. The performances more refined. And somewhere in all that flourished language, the cruelty hides a little better. Until it doesn't. A visitor arrives from another town, Meyerwood, 3 days south. She wears a cloak of bright green and speaks with an accent. She sells dyes and powders, tells stories, for coin, makes the children laugh with sleight of hand. They say she's a cunning woman, which is to say, someone who knows more than she should. Someone who makes people uncomfortable. You like her instantly. But soon the whispers shift. Someone claims she cured a sick baby. Someone else says she charmed a goat. A third swears she looked at their child and gave them nightmares. And just like that, the town calls her a witch. Not with fire, not with trial, with a chair, a cucking stool, suspended above the ducking pond. She's strapped in arms and legs. Her mouth is bound not to stop spells, but to prevent reason. Each dunk into the pond is slower than the last. The crowd is smaller this time, less joyous, more uncertain. But no one stops it. Afterwards, she's released and told to leave. She does. Silently. And no one says a word. Not even you. Because now you understand how bizarre punishment works best, not when it's loud, but when it's familiar. When no one questions it. When no one steps out of line. And when someone does, they become a story. Like the scribe who wrote satirical verses about the Baron. They didn't torture him, just sent him to the square with an ink pot chained around his neck. Every passerby could dip their finger and write a word on his robes. Some wrote insults, others drew pictures. By the end of the day, he was a walking scroll of shame. They called it the manuscript of regret. You wonder if he kept the robes afterward. You think about how many punishments were inventions, not traditions, not laws. Just someone's idea, a clever way to humiliate someone until they disappear. You wonder how many more are waiting in the minds of men who like watching others kneel. The real absurdity of medieval punishment, you realize, isn't how creative it became. It's how acceptable it was. How easy it was to mask vengeance as justice, cruelty as discipline, fear as order. You remember what the traveler asked, why do they do it? And now the answer feels sharper. Because it works. Because nothing keeps people in line like the image of someone else being dragged through the mud wearing shame like a second skin. Because the moment someone suggests mercy, they risk looking guilty themselves. You pass the shame tree again that evening. A new sign hangs from it. This one reads, "I saw too much and said nothing." No name. You pause and keep walking. The frost comes early this year, lacing the edges of windows and turning puddles into thin, brittle sheets that crack underfoot. You wrap your cloak tighter and keep your head down. The cold makes the town quieter, but not kinder. If anything, the silence feels heavier, thicker, like the air itself is waiting for something to happen. And it does. One morning, just as the sun cracks over the rooftops, you're woken by bells. Not church bells. Not the town crier's cowbell. It's the bell of summons. Hung above the magistrate's hall, it only rings when something extraordinary has happened. You follow the crowd, still buttoning your tunic, drawn toward the noise like a moth toward flame. Everyone gathers around the pillory where a tall figure stands tied by the wrists. It's the town's cooper, old honest slow to anger. His hair is wild, his eyes red. His hands shake, not from cold, but from fear. The accusation, treasonous speech. Apparently someone overheard him questioning the baron's tithe. Just a complaint, really, something about how even barrels of spoiled wine are taxed as if they were gold. But the new bailiff, freshly appointed from a larger town, doesn't take such words lightly. He's the one who brought the mock crown. You've never seen it used before. It's a metal circlet, jagged and oversized, painted gold but flaking. When worn, it's heavy enough to bruise. The accused is forced to wear it along with a purple tunic stitched with the word kinglet. The idea is clear: to mock anyone who challenges authority as a foolish pretender. The cooper is made to bow at every doorway, every post, every passerby. Children laugh. Some don't understand what they're seeing, only that it's funny. But you see the terror in the cooper's face. The way he flinches every time someone calls him Your Majesty. The way shame, when dressed in costume, feels less like pain and more like erasure. Because it's not about correcting him. It's about reducing him to a joke. You've seen this pattern before. Punishments that transform a person into a role. The brank turns a woman into a caricature of wickedness. The cucking stool into a spectacle of folly. The mock crown into a cartoon of rebellion. You start to understand that the goal isn't just obedience, it's humiliation, but not just for the punished. For everyone watching, a reminder you are not exempt. You too can be made ridiculous. You can be dressed up, named, paraded. You can be turned into a fable. That evening at the bakery, the apprentices won't stop joking about King Cooper. One even makes a little crown from dough. They bake it, sell it. It sells well. You want to be angry, but mostly you feel numb. The next week, a girl is punished for idle temptations, for walking barefoot to the stream in summer months ago. Someone finally reported it. Her sentence, the garland of shame, a floral wreath normally used in weddings and church feasts, now twisted with thorns and worn as a mocking symbol. She must wear it while sweeping the chapel steps. It bleeds her forehead. People call her Lady Rose. She stops looking anyone in the eye. It's so gentle looking, this punishment. So pretty. And that makes it worse. Because it's not about pain. It's about making sure she can never be seen the same way again. You remember the first time you laughed at a punishment? Years ago. A man forced to carry a broom and sweep the path he walked as if tidying his way out of crime. You laughed because everyone else did, because it seemed silly, harmless. Now you wonder what happened to him after, where he went, what name they gave him. That night you lie awake listening to the sound of distant coughing and the creak of wind-blown shutters. Somewhere a dog barks once, then silence. You think about all the punishments you've seen, how strange they are, how specific, how creative. And you ask yourself, not for the first time, who comes up with these things, who dreams of parading someone in mirrored boots because they danced too freely, who invents the idea of binding lovers back to back and forcing them to march around the town square, who decides that shame must be ornamented. It's not the law. The law is vague, dusty, mostly unread. It's people, magistrates, bailiffs, councils, sometimes even neighbors. They imagine the punishment, and then it becomes real. That's what chills you. Not the iron, not the cold, but the idea that the most bizarre punishments of all are simply made up, and no one ever stops them, because everyone's too afraid they might be next. There's a saying people use around Kesterfield whenever something strange happens, whenever a cart tips without cause, or a cow walks backwards, or a child speaks in their sleep. They say, well, better that than the latter. You don't understand what it means at first. A ladder is just a ladder, until you see it hauled into the square on the back of a cart freshly scrubbed and gleaming with candle wax along its rungs. 12 steps, all symbolic. It's time for a ladder confession. This punishment only appears once or twice a year. It's rare, ritualistic, reserved for offenses that aren't quite crimes, but that disrupt the fabric of town life. Today, it's a mason accused of false pride. He built a wall too high, apparently a wall that blocked the view of the chapel for those in the south fields. No one was harmed. Nothing was damaged. But the town council found it spiritually intrusive. So they sentenced him to confession by climb. He's made to stand at the base of the ladder, read a prepared apology, then climb each step slowly. At each rung, he must name a personal fault, real or invented. I am prideful. I overmeasure my worth. I put stone above scripture. At the top, he turns and bows to the crowd, then climbs back down in silence. When it's done, the crowd disperses as if a sermon had ended. No stones, no shouts, just quiet judgment. You find it even more chilling than the gibbet, because he did nothing wrong, and everyone knew it. But the ritual was followed, and somehow that made it feel justified. The more you watch these strange punishments, the more you notice how deeply they rely on one thing: agreement. Not law, not proof. Just consensus that this is what should be done. And once that agreement forms, even the most absurd punishment becomes ordinary. Take the feathering bench, for instance. A tailor accused of pride in dress is seated on a bench in the square. Villagers take turns gluing feathers to his clothes with egg whites and paste. By the end of the day, he looks like a plucked bird in reverse. He must sit until sunset. No injury, no blood. But he never wears color again, or the thistle walk. A girl caught picking flowers from the baron's hedges must walk barefoot through a narrow path lined with fresh-cut thistles. She flinches, bleeds a little, keeps her chin high. Afterward, people say she walked proud, as if she chose it. But they never let her forget. Not even when she leaves. Not even when she returns years later as someone's wife. Because the memory of punishment is stronger than any absolution. One day you speak carefully with an old stonemason who's seen more decades than most. He's missing 3 fingers and wears a wooden toe. You ask him if punishments used to be like this. He shakes his head. No, he says. They used to be worse. More blood, less theater. Which is better, you ask? He considers, then says, at least with blood it ended. That night you can't sleep. You think about how eternal some punishments are, not because of their length, but because of how they live on in people's minds. The man in the mock crown may have returned to his barrels, but he'll always be kinglet. The girl in the garland of shame will always be Lady Rose. The scribe from the manuscript of regret still called blotter in passing. And you wonder what happens when someone invents a punishment so strange, so memorable, that it changes not just a person's fate, but the town's culture. Because that's what you've started to see. Punishments become tradition. Tradition becomes memory. Memory becomes law, even when it was never written. And you begin to realize that the strangest punishments of all are the ones that no longer feel strange. The ladder, the brank, the shame plaques. They've woven themselves into the rhythm of life. And every time someone says, better that than the ladder, they're not being sarcastic. They're being honest. Because the ladder, it doesn't scar you. It doesn't beat you. It just changes what people see when they look at you. And that never goes away. It starts with a cough, then 2, then a fever, and suddenly the punishment stops. Not officially, no law is suspended, no decree made. But when illness creeps into a town like a fog, even the cruelest minds hesitate. The magistrate retreats into his manor. The priest stops blessing the stocks. The pillory sits empty for a week. You watch from a distance, waiting to see if this means change. But punishment doesn't die. It simply mutates. You hear it first as a joke in the tavern. If you can't whip them, quarantine them. At first people laugh. Then someone gets the idea to turn isolation into spectacle. The next offender is a tanner accused of intimate misconduct. A vague charge whispered and not detailed. He's sentenced not to flogging nor to ducking, but to a window watch. For 5 days he must sit inside his home with the shutters open, back straight facing outward from dawn to dusk. A chalkboard is nailed to the ledge I trespassed against decency. He's allowed no curtain, no distraction. People walk by and gawk as if he's livestock on display. Some even throw pebbles. By the second day, a second window opens across the lane. A woman convicted of nagging her husband is made to do the same. 2 silent figures watching each other from behind glass. It becomes known as the silent exchange. Punishment made private, yet public. And somehow, even more bizarre. Because in its quietness, it asks the onlookers to become the enforcers. You can't unsee it. And soon you notice it spreading. The rope of reflection, worn around the neck for 3 days by anyone caught speaking during church. Not tight, just symbolic. It's tied with 3 knots, one for the sin, one for the self, and one for society. The spoon of shame. carried by those who took more than their share at feasts. It's wooden painted red and must be held in the hand at all times for a week, even while sleeping. It's not heavy, just humiliating. The cloak of echoes. You hear about it secondhand, a punishment from a neighboring village. A person caught gossiping must repeat everything anyone says to them for a full day. A mimicry meant to silence through absurdity. Each of these punishments is light on the body, but heavy on the soul. They don't leave bruises. They leave awkwardness, isolation, endless attention. And maybe that's more effective, because bruises fade, but shame lingers. You think back to the cooper in the mock crown, the tailor in feathers, the girl with the thorny garland. None of them bled, but none of them smiled again either. One evening, you overhear a group of boys inventing new punishments for fun. One suggests forcing someone to carry a mirror at all times. Another says you should make people wear their sins on signs tied to their backs. They're laughing, but you see the magistrate's clerk nearby listening and writing. You feel a chill not from the cold, but from the sense that even imagination isn't safe. Because once an idea is born, it can be used. You walk past the ducking pond. The water is still. A frog jumps from the bank. No one has been ducked in weeks, but the plank still waits half-mossed ready. Punishment is patient. It doesn't need to be constant. It just needs to be remembered. And you begin to see the real strangeness. It's not the tools, not the stocks or stools or crowns. It's the way they make everyone into a participant. The children who name the punished. The women who whisper what someone must have done. The men who build the frames and paint the signs. Even you. You watch. You remember. You don't intervene, because that would be strange. And in a town where the bizarre is normal, doing the right thing becomes the oddest act of all. The sky turns gray with the weight of early snow, and the village breathes in unison, slow, cautious, tight. The cold settles into bones and between floorboards, but it doesn't stop the rhythm of punishment. It simply changes the tone. You start hearing a new phrase, mercy with ceremony. At first you think it's a joke, but then you realize it's a policy, a compromise, they say. For minor offenses, ones that once earned lashes or stocks, the town now offers a new path, a merciful sentence provided it is done with proper ceremony. They don't want to hurt people, they say. Just make sure the lesson sticks. You soon witness your first example. A miller's boy accused of selling short measures is brought to the square. But instead of the whipping post, he's given the honest sack, a flour sack stitched with phrases like, "Weight is truth and justice is full grain." He must wear it for 1 week, working in full view of the townsfolk, reciting his prices aloud every time he sells something. It's light-hearted, some say, even kind. But you see how he lowers his head, how he flinches every time someone chuckles, because he knows it's not mercy. It's just decorated humiliation, and more punishments like it appear each day. The bell of blame. A child caught stealing sweets must wear a small bell that chimes with every step. They call it the sweetest sound. The candle of guilt. A woman who missed Mass must carry a lit candle all through Sunday service, even while kneeling. If it blows out, she must start again. The cradle march. A pair of lovers caught in the hayloft are made to carry an empty cradle back and forth along the town wall for an hour. No words spoken, just the creak of wood and the weight of implication. Everyone says it's better than flogging, and maybe it is. But better doesn't mean just. It means clever. It means memorable. You begin to notice that the most bizarre punishments are often the ones wrapped in gentleness. Because when cruelty smiles, it becomes harder to name, harder to refuse, and much harder to stop. You overhear two elders debating a new suggestion anyone caught using foul language must wear: the muff of mirth, a ridiculous woolen hand warmer stitched with cartoonish lips. Every time they curse someone nearby must blow a whistle. They say it'll be educational. You say nothing. You've learned that protest becomes participation. If you mock the punishment, they say you condone the offense. If you defend the guilty, you invite suspicion. If you remain silent, you survive. So you choose silence. Until one day you find yourself next to the shame tree again. A new sign flaps in the wind. Mercy is just cruelty waiting to bloom. It's unsigned. But someone wrote it and left it in the open. You look around. No one's watching. You tear it down, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. Because you know if the council sees it, they'll invent something new, a punishment for doubt. Probably something poetic, something with feathers, or mirrors, or flowers that wilt when worn too long. That's the terrifying thing. You've stopped wondering what they'll come up with next, and started wondering how beautiful it will look. Winter deepens. The snow comes heavy now, cloaking the roofs and muting the town's edges in white. Everything is quieter, slower, except for punishment. Somehow, even with frozen roads and shuttered shops, the rituals continue. Perhaps because they must. Perhaps because the cold makes people restless, and restlessness needs an outlet. The council announces a new tradition, the Festival of Rectitude. At first glance, it seems festive. Colored banners, music, a procession. But beneath the cheer, it's simply a pageant of punishment. The guilty are made to wear costumes and walk the square as living lessons. Each bears a sign listing their offense, calligraphy done in gilded ink, as if that makes it noble. A butcher who watered down stew is made to wear a paper crown of bones. A gossip must carry a puppet shaped like a parrot. A woman accused of envy is painted green from forehead to chin. They call it moral masquerade. Children watch with wide eyes. Adults sip mulled wine and nod solemnly. You're told to bake justice loaves, small dry cakes, stamped with the town's crest, and a single word truth. People hand them out as tokens, and somehow this eating of judgment becomes its own strange ritual. You begin to wonder if anyone remembers why this all started, or if the punishment itself has become the town's true religion. And then the strangest punishment of all appears. The Echo Cloister. A carpenter accused of spreading doubt about the festival's cost is given an eerie sentence: 24 hours alone in the echo chamber. It's a bare room in the old crypts beneath the chapel, curved in such a way that every whisper bounces back tenfold. He is told to sit in silence. Any noise he makes, any shuffle, sigh, or sob returns to him in waves. They say it's to teach inner harmony. When he returns, he walks differently, slower, like his thoughts weigh more than before. No one asks what he heard, but you wonder. Because you've felt it too in dreams and in passing reflections, the way punishment wraps itself around thought. Not just action, not just speech. It teaches you what not to feel, what not to question. That's what makes it so strange. Not that the punishments are creative, but that they're effective in ways no one admits. You pass the town's record hall one morning and notice new plaques being hung. Latter Confessions, 1322, 1351. Garlands of Shame of Florilegium. Chronicle of Cuckings. They're turning punishment into history, into heritage. There's even talk of a museum. You imagine a little boy standing beside his father, reading the brass label beneath a brank. An early method for regulating women's tongues, and the father nodding, not in disgust, but in approval. That's when you realize the worst part. Bizarre punishment doesn't just shape lives. It shapes memory. It becomes the story a town tells itself. And every time someone laughs or claps or nods at a feathered hat or a painted face, the memory tightens. Until no one remembers how strange it is. Until it becomes just normal. You sit by the fire that night alone and wonder what punishment you would be given. Not for crime, not for harm, but for seeing too much. Maybe they'd blindfold you not to stop your sight, but to teach you how not to use it. Maybe they'd make you wear a mirror on your chest, so people could see themselves when they judged you. Maybe they wouldn't punish you at all. Just watch. Until you broke on your own. Because in the end, that's the genius of bizarre punishment. It doesn't always need to strike. It just needs to wait, to linger, to outlast courage. And slowly, one gilded plaque, one painted cheek, one whispered rule at a time turn a whole village into a theater, where guilt is staged. And justice is just another costume. Snow melts. Not all at once, but in slow, glistening drips that leave behind slush and rot. The town exhales like it's survived something, though no one names what. The festival of rectitude has ended. The costumes are packed away. The plaques hang in quiet reverence. But punishment doesn't sleep. It simply shifts again. Now it's spring, the season of renewal, and with it comes a new obsession redemption. Not genuine forgiveness, not restoration, but a more peculiar version, one that requires a performance. They call it the path of return. It begins with a bell. A man who once fled his sentence months ago during a whipping day rainstorm has been caught in a nearby hamlet. He's brought back not in chains, but on foot. Clean, shaven, dressed in white. The town gathers to watch. He walks through the square, barefoot, head bowed, carrying a staff carved with the phrase, "I choose to come back." The council calls it graceful accountability. You see it for what it is, a staged surrender. By the 4th hour, he's allowed to kneel at the shame tree and touch the trunk. That's the end. He's forgiven. But no one will hire him, because he's the one who left. In Chesterfield, leaving is worse than sin. It's disrespecting the ritual. From that day, pathwalkers become a thing. Voluntary punishments to prove innocence. People accused of idle chatter or laziness offer to walk the path of return before they're even charged. It's self-punishment. It's anticipation. And it spreads like fever. One baker confesses to nothing but still walks the path. Just to be safe, he says. You begin to wonder if guilt even matters anymore. or if the rituals are now a way to maintain the story. Because a town that punishes itself doesn't need authority. It just needs tradition. And there are so many new ones. The weeping spoon. If someone is accused of emotional coldness, they must serve soup in the square for a week using only a carved spoon shaped like a teardrop. Their apron reads, "May I warm what I've chilled." The wreath of listening, worn by those who interrupt too often in council meetings. A circle of dried lavender and mint hung on the ears with ribbon. To sweeten the air, they say. To remind them to hear. The companion's burden, for those who wrong a friend. The offender must carry a second cloak dragging behind, stitched with the other's name. When they speak, they must say "we" instead of "I." It's almost beautiful, if it weren't so crushing, because it pretends to be healing. But what it really does is mark, not with pain, but with memory. You speak to a visiting monk, someone who's been to other towns, even cities. You ask if he's seen anything like this. He hesitates, then tells you about the town of shadows, far east, where people write down their misdeeds and burn the papers each full moon. Cleansing rituals, he says. But those notes are never really gone. They whisper. The smoke lingers. You understand exactly what he means. Because even in Kesterfield, the air feels thick with things unsaid. People move kindly now, but not freely. They smile but glance over their shoulders. They comply but also conform in ways that feel too synchronized to be real. The town has become one large rehearsal, everyone playing roles. You look around and realize there is no longer a clear line between punishment and identity, because when people are punished for who they are, they learn to become someone else, someone smaller, quieter, less noticed. You used to wonder why these punishments were so bizarre. Now you wonder how they haven't gotten worse. And you wonder what would happen if someone created a punishment that was invisible. A gesture, a phrase, a shrug. Something passed from person to person, like a curse, until the town itself can't tell who's guilty and who's afraid. And maybe that's already happening. Maybe that is the final stage of bizarre punishment, when no one is punished, because everyone already walks carefully enough not to need it. The rains return, soft at first, pattering against the rooftops like a lullaby. But by the second week, the streets turn to mud and the corners to rot. It's the kind of weather that soaks into bones, that curls shoes, that wears down walls and tempers. The world feels soggy and slow, but not even the rain can wash away the rituals. The council meets again. Another announcement. Another invention. This time they unveil something called the forgiveness bellows. It's exactly what it sounds like, a large leather bellows, painted white, mounted in the square. Every Friday, the week's wrongdoers must come forth and take turns working the bellows. Each press is meant to represent a confession expelled from the soul. With every whoosh of air, the crowd is invited to forgive, not through words, but through nods. You watch it happen. A cooper who lied about prices, a shepherd who let his flock wander, a mother who snapped at her neighbor. All of them pushing air into silence, praying that the nods will come. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And that's when the final stage of bizarre punishment reveals itself. It no longer requires approval from above. The magistrates don't scold. The priest doesn't decree. Instead, the punishment is performed, and it's up to the public to respond. A nod, a turned back, a cough, a pause too long. That's all it takes now. Judgment has become communal. Everyone a judge. Everyone a defendant. Everyone afraid. One day a woman you've known since childhood is accused of dishonesty. No trial, no evidence. Just concerned whispers. She walks the path, works the bellows, offers apology after apology. But no one nods. Not even you. And in that moment you feel it in your chest, the truth you've avoided this whole time. It was never about the stocks or the shame hats or the thorny wreaths. It was always about permission. Not to punish, but to believe the punishment was right. That's what makes them so bizarre. Not the feathers, not the bells, not the poems stitched into cloaks. It's the way they ask you softly to become part of the spectacle, to nod along, to look away, to pretend that this is justice, that this is order, that this is fair. And each time you do, the wheel turns smoother, the rituals grow prettier, the punishments become harder to see. One night just before dusk, you visit the shame tree. Its bark is darker now. The signs have been replaced with brass. Small carvings line the roots, little symbols of past wrongs. A woman walks past and touches one, a tiny spoon etched in silver. She bows her head. She's not even the one who wore it. And still she remembers. You realize then the most effective punishment isn't public. It isn't loud. It's internal. It's when people begin to punish themselves for things no one accused them of. It's when fear becomes routine, when silence becomes wisdom, when kindness is suspect, when laughter needs approval. You walk home beneath the heavy sky, unsure if you're clean or complicit. And for the first time you ask a question that doesn't feel rhetorical. Not, why were the punishments so bizarre, but rather, how did we let them become so beautiful? Because maybe that's what makes them dangerous. Not that they hurt, but that they dazzle, that they rhyme, that they feel fair. And somewhere along the way, what began as justice has become choreography. And no one dares stop the music, because they've all learned the steps, even you. You lie back now, eyes soft, limbs heavy, your breath easing into the rhythm of sleep. The flickers of torches and the echo of bells grow distant, fading into mist. You're no longer in Kesterfield. The town square, the shame tree. The masks and murmurs, all of it melts like snow beneath the thawing sun. But the strange beauty of it lingers, doesn't it? That haunting balance between cruelty and ceremony, between judgment and performance, between the visible and the unspoken. In a world where guilt was dressed in ribbons and silence held more power than any whip, you saw how easily punishment could become culture, and how culture could become control, soft, elegant, nearly invisible. And maybe that's the part that whispers loudest. Not the lash of justice, but the lullaby of obedience. You're safe now, though, wrapped in warmth, still unjudged. There is no shame tree here, no garland of thorns. No feathering bench waiting with names stitched in thread. Just you, the quiet and the peace of knowing that stories, however strange, stay where they belong once told. You made it through. You listened. You learned. You remembered. And now it's time to let go. Let your mind float where rules don't reach, where no bells toll, where no steps need watching, where no nods are required. Drift slowly, gently into sleep like parchment falling through air, unread, untouched, and free of decree. Tomorrow can hold its own judgments. Tonight belongs to dreams.